Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the eMLB Insider Podcast. Our preseason coverage for the 2026 season continues. Last time we talked about who we thought were the winners and losers of the offseason, and now we're going to take a dive into the American League and give our predictions as to where we think teams are going to end up, who's going to make the playoffs, and who our award winners are going to be. And with me, as always, is my co-host, JR. How are you doing today, Jared?
Pretty good, man. How you doing? This is always so exciting to talk about predictions because that means the season is almost here.
I am so excited to get back into another regular season, and the fact that the start of the regular season falls on the charity streamathon that Commission's putting on this year, I think is huge because it combines the spectacle of opening day with the awesome fundraising event for the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute.
Big
Please,
spotlight.
yeah, a huge spotlight for that, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. We'll get to see how bad Kamish is at Mario Kart and see his kids whoop him. Um, and so if you guys are, and he's not the only person streaming, if you guys want to see who all is going to be participating and how you can also contribute to this fundraiser, we're actually already taking donations for the fundraiser now. We've got, if you join Kamish's Discord, I believe he put a link in there. If not, he put it on his stream. I can't remember one way or the other. I know he put it on his stream because people were donating already on the stream, but he is also going to be announcing who are the other streamers that are participating. And while JR and I may not be considered a streamer, we are launching a brand new real life sports podcast with Aiden and Brendan of the Here's Why You're Wrong podcast. We wanted to keep the spotlight on Commish, though. This isn't about us debuting our podcast. This is about us also supporting a great cause because it's actually something personal to me. My mom has been fighting cancer for over 6 years now, and so it's a place that's near and dear to my heart. And so I wanted to do my part and figure out a way to contribute because I participated last year as a streamer because I was a streamer at the time, and now I don't stream. So I wanted to find some way to do my part and help raise money for the Dana-Farber Cancer Research Institute. So if you want more information on that, please join our Discord if you haven't already. Commission is posting announcements about how the whole event will go, and help us, as Commission would say, kick cancer in the donkey. I'm going to censor myself so I don't have to use a Chara Bunny on myself. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, everybody around has been touched in some way or form by cancer. So, by all means, we're going to try to do whatever we can to be a part of a great event like that. Even if you can't support it financially, showing up as a viewer and helping be a part of those festivities would be great.
As well as taking any announcements that Kamish makes, whether it's in our Discord or on his Twitter, because he's going to be doing this on Twitter as well, and retweeting it, sending it to people that may not know about our community. Just try to spread the word about the fundraiser event that we're doing and try to bring as many people into it as possible, because the more eyes we can get on it, the more potentially we can raise for the institution. So. All right, without further ado, we are going to get into our predictions for the American League. Last year, let's do a quick recap of last year's success. Last year, we saw the Baltimore Orioles with the best record in baseball win the American League East, the AL Central in a surprise breakdown by the Detroit Tigers, saw Kansas City come in and take the division at the last second. And then we saw a two-way tie for the top of the AL East between Texas and Los Angeles. Los Angeles took the tiebreaker game, so they ended up winning the division, which sent Texas to the wild card game against Boston. In that wild card game, Texas was able to defeat Boston and move on to the AL Division Series against Baltimore. Baltimore was able to come out on top in that division series, while Los Angeles was able to take care of Kansas City. And then the American League Championship Series, Baltimore was the team that was able to move on to the World Series, taking down the Angels. So, how is that going to compare to what happens this year? And we're going to do something a little bit different. In the past, we've shown, like, when we're doing power rankings or predictions, like we kind of like do like a pre-made presentation kind of thing. I thought it would be more fun if we do this live. So we've got two tier maker lists here where I know it has the logos of all the teams in the league. It was just the one that I found. I'm not going to search for an AL only one. But what we're going to do is on here, we have a spot for division winners, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And then right below division winners, we have wild card. So what we're going to do is, as we're talking about this, I'm going to move the team to the tier that we think the teams are going to end in. We're not going to. I'm not a huge fan of predicting records because I would be the type of person that would be like, I have to make sure that the numbers equate out to how many games. Like you guys know me, I'm a numbers person. It would just take me way too long to try to figure that out, and it would bother me if I didn't do it. So we're just going to talk about generic placements, and then I'm not going to fill the wild card spot out until after we tell you where we think everyone's going to place in the division, because we could technically have a third place team go into a wild card spot if we think 3 teams come out of one division. So I'm leaving the wild card blank until we fill out the divisions, and then I'll move teams into the wild card spot as we discuss it. So on the left, you're going to have my choices. On the right, you're going to have JR's choices. And JR, what division do you want to start with first?
Let's start with the AL East.
All right, classic. We'll go classic East to West then.
Yeah, let's go that route.
We'll go classic East to West, and we will go from 5 to 1. So, JR, who do you think will end up in last place in the AL East, and why?
For this one, I think it's going to be a repeat of last year with the Yankees, pulling up the rear. Actually, I forgot the Yankees were 4th. So I do have the Yankees.
The last year they were 4th. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, okay. That was my mistake. But I do have them in 5th place. They're one of those teams just really hasn't done much in the offseason to make much in the way of improvements. And if you caught our winners and losers of the offseason show, there's another team there that probably leapfrogged them based on their moves. So I've got the Yankees there.
All right, and I agree with that as well. I just don't think the Yankees really did anything to improve. I think they are waiting on young talent to develop to be able to make an impact at the major league roster. I think for them, the no moves this offseason was a strategy in and of itself. Like, you don't need to go out there and try to sign a bunch of people if you're not really expecting to contend. As we noted on the last podcast, though, I did talk about how I thought Toronto made a lot of good moves, even though they were kind of in the same situation where they made like low commitments to players that could end up flipping for more pieces or end up being a veteran core for their young people. But the Yankees, because they really haven't done anything in this offseason, they're waiting on that young talent. I think they will also end up last in the division. And who I think is going to be number 4 is the team I just mentioned. I think Toronto still ends up at number 4. They are, like I said, I love what they did this offseason with the moves that they've made. But talent-wise across the board, outside of Vlad Guerrero Jr., which you have to wonder how long Toronto's going to hold on to him to see maybe if they could flip him for a lot of good pieces if he starts getting too old before the rebuild's done. But outside of him, we don't really have anything to write home about. But they did make good moves, but it's not going to be enough to overcome any of the other talent in the rest of the division.
Yeah, I would agree. I've got the Blue Jays in that 4th spot too. Again, they definitely made some moves to improve, but just I don't think anything that they did was impactful enough, to really kind of get out of that, quote unquote second tier of the division.
But they made the moves to overtake the Yankees. They won't finish last in the division.
yeah. It's any step forward is still a step forward.
Exactly. They're making progress, and they like the Yankees are waiting for some young guys to develop. So. All right, third spot.
This was a little tough for me. I think 2 and 3 here are pretty close. I have Boston here at number 3. The Red Sox had really a surprising season last year, I think, for all of us. They started out for I believe maybe it was the first month or so of the season, maybe had the best record in the league, and we're really off to a hot start. And, I think we all were kind of maybe waiting for them at some point to kind of come back to earth. And they did, they definitely cooled off, but they still, were enough to get into the wild card, win 92 games. So, hats off to Billy for putting a winner together there. I just think, they had several guys that really had monster seasons at the plate last year. I don't necessarily know how likely it is that all of those guys can perform like that again. And their pitching is still, I would say a little suspect, especially compared to kind of the other two big contenders in that division.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to copy you because I feel like I know where this is going. But for all of those reasons, I agree with you. I was going back and forth on whether to put the Red Sox here or the team I have in second here. I think the last comment you made is the most important, and that is their pitching is not anywhere close to how good their hitting is. And I do think there will be some regression of the Red Sox hitting, but I just think their pitching, even though they traded for Syndergaard at the deadline last year, which was definitely a needed upgrade, I still think it has room to improve. I don't think they really did anything in the offseason to address it either, other than making Syndergaard a re-rate, if I remember correctly. Did they do anyone else? No, they didn't really add anyone else. So, like we mentioned in the Winners and Losers podcast that we talked about a couple teams that did address their pitching. Boston was not one of them, and they can arguably be one of the teams that needed pitching the most.
Yeah.
So because of that, I'm also going to put them in third. And the team I have in second is I'm trying to move it on the software, not on the actual website. I have Baltimore finishing second in the division, mostly because they just traded away the AL MVP. Now, to be fair, they got a great return, as an AL MVP should. But replacing that production is going to be extremely difficult. Not only that, but they lost their ace A, ace B between Ethan Knight and Jim Reed. They lost ace B, who could also be ace A, honestly. They lost Jim Reed for the season during the playoffs last year. So with those two key pieces, I still think Baltimore is going to play well and will contend for a potential wild card spot, but I don't think that it's enough to repeat as division winners.
Yeah, and again, we're starting off here by really agreeing, but I definitely have Baltimore in that slot for many of the same reasons. I think 2 and 3 there, I think, are pretty tightly packed.
I would agree.
I could really go either way there, but I think those two teams, at least heading into the season, from my viewpoint, are definitely a step down from who we have in the top spot.
And then that means the Rays.
The Rays, yeah,
are going to be our division winners.
Yeah, the Rays were. I feel like they kind of had an oddball. Not to pull a pun on Jim Reed there, but
no, it's nutball, not oddball.
Yeah. I feel like they had a little bit of an oddball, quirky season last year where, you kind of just waited for them to really get hot at some point. Really waited for some of their talent to kick in, and it kind of just didn't happen. Charles has assembled a really talented team there. They've got some other, young guys, coming up, getting ready to contribute, like, Doc Luger and Ham Porter and some of those guys. And I think that this year, maybe some of that momentum that just didn't pop up last season, they'll be able to pull in.
Yeah, and in terms of their offseason, they didn't really do much. They did add first baseman Drew Mendoza from Los Angeles in a trade, which I think is a really good addition to them. First base was one place where you could see them needing an upgrade. I think Mendoza is a good upgrade for them.
Yeah.
So, but when you have a team that has the likes of Wander Franco and Ben Spears solidifying your lineup and rotation, you're going to be a team that competes every year. And I agree with you. I think we were waiting for the Rays to break out, catch on fire, but instead it was the Orioles that caught on fire.
Yeah.
And we basically, what happened with the Orioles is exactly what we thought was going to happen with the Rays. And I think this year it's the Rays trying to catch on fire and take away that division.
Yeah.
All right, so there you have it. There is our AL East. We have the exact same order. I hope this doesn't happen for all of the divisions, but we've got the Rays at 1, Orioles 2, Red Sox 3, Toronto 4, and the Yankees at 5. Who would have thought you'd ever see a league where we're predicting the Yankees to finish last in the division in the AL East? Crazy world this eMLB world is.
That was eMLB 1.0. The Yankees were the perennial doormat.
Yeesh. Well, we'll see what happens in a few years once they start developing some of that talent that they got there. They've got a lot of good pieces in their farm system, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. East to West, AL Central's next. I'll go first with my number 5. Oh, what am I doing with number 5? This honestly, this was a really hard division to pick. I think this is gonna be so hard to predict. This is one of those divisions that's like you could shuffle around any of them. I think I'm gonna go. And by the way, I did a tier maker list that had the Guardians logo instead of the Indians logo because this was the most current one. In eMLB, they are still the Indians, and I think barely the Indians are going to end up last in the division. They are definitely in a rebuild mode. They added a great re-rate candidate in Aaron Judge, and I think he's going to do very well for them. But I think they were definitely showing last year with moving on from Jose Ramirez that they were in a rebuild mode. They are trying to gain talent across the board. They're not trying to do anything crazy. They have a lot of solid pieces, but and again, they could easily end up third or maybe even second, honestly. I'm just going to put them at the bottom, and it's not going to be by much, honestly.
Yeah, for me, I kind of went back and forth on this as well, but I actually have the Chicago White Sox in the fifth slot.
Oh, they finished third in the division last year, correct?
Yeah, they were 82 and
Wow.
80, third place in the division last year. I think, for me, putting them there maybe says a little bit more about what I think Cleveland did and what I think Minnesota did. But this also could depend a little bit on, at what point in the season Ed Brown comes up. I don't know how ready he might be for the majors, but I think Josh has a lot of good talent there. I think they have some future ahead that could take them to some places, but in this kind of jumbled up division, I've got them in fifth for this year.
Yeah, I feel like that's the sense across the entire division that these are teams that are like on the cusp of competing, and because all of them are on the cusp of being playoff teams, it's going to be a crazy scramble when you're looking at 2 through 5, honestly.
Yeah.
So who do you have at number 4 then?
So number 4, I do have Cleveland. Hopping up a notch from where they finished in 2025. Sadier has made a lot of trades in the offseason, moving a lot of pieces around. And I think he's picked up a little bit with some of those moves. You mentioned the Aaron Judge signing as well. I think that's a guy that can contribute for him. He's still got Francisco Lindor there, who's kind of been holding things down. He still had a over a 5 WAR last season, even though he's getting a little bit older. I'm very interested to see what he gets out of a full season with Matt Wallner, who I know he got from you in that big trade 3-way deal at the deadline. So kind of intrigued about what they're going to get from a full season of him there. And he's got some a couple of young pitching arms that are going to be coming up here soon as well. So I think they take a little step forward here this season.
All right, and we'll just do a little bit of a flip of each other because I've got the White Sox at number 4, kind of for the same reasons that you mentioned. They have some good pieces. They did perform. They were around the 500 mark this year, which was, I think, what was it, the first time in how many years that they had hit the 500 mark? Because that was a big goal of Hedges. But I do not think that they have the pitching to keep up with the rest of the division. I think that's going to be where their weak point is. They need to add in some quality pitching, especially in the park that they play in. They need quality pitching to keep the ball from flying out of their yard from the opposing team. And I think for that reason, they're going to end up in 4th this year. Unfortunately, I think they're going to end up back under 500. It's disappointing because of the step forward they took last year, but I don't think they really. I think it's more, and honestly, I think it's more because of the moves that the other 3 teams made above them, more than like they didn't get worse. I just think the 3 teams above them made the moves to jump them in the standings, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And here's probably where my most controversial pick is going to be at number 3. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from Minerva, but I've got the Royals finishing third this year. The defending AL Central champions, I have finishing third, and it's more because like they have a couple of great players. They have hopefully Barbosa comes back from injury and pitches well. They have Lucas Parker. They have Andrew Vaughn. I think their role players are below league average in terms of the rest of the people that fill out their roster. And I don't think their superstars can carry them back to another division title. Like J Ram, Andrew Vaughn, fantastic hitters. Petey Halpin was a great story for them last year. And if Barbosa comes back, he could be a great story. As like, if we did comeback player of the year, he would be one of those candidates. But I just think that the role players around them are something that needs improvement. They've tried to make moves to improve that, but I don't think it's going to be enough to repeat as AL Central champions, honestly.
Yeah, and guess what? You stole my thunder because I was going to have the Royals.
Dang it!
At number 3 also. Again, for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. And I think, I think for me, the biggest, maybe the biggest issue with the trade of Rosario, again, from a long-term standpoint, I can, get behind potentially making that deal. I still don't know that I would have made that deal. But the biggest issue with that deal for right now, for this season, you're assuming that Jorge Barbosa is going to come back and be ace caliber. We can't assume that is going to be the case.
Yeah,
so,
what was it? What was the injury? Like a torn ACL or something like that? What was it? UCL, partially torn UCL.
Yeah.
That's not an easy injury to come back from.
Yeah, so I mean, he's going to be healthy. He's going to be back pitching, but is he going to be the same pitcher this year? Sometimes they say it takes a full year for a guy to completely really recover, and that's another reason I just could not get behind making that deal for them.
And not only that, the other moves that Kansas City made this offseason told you that they were doing whatever they could to repeat as AL Central champions, but then they go out and make a deal that's more long-term focused than short-term focused with adding Corbin Coe while moving Rosario. Like Corbin Coe I feel like he's going to be a great pitcher, but he's not that right now.
Yeah.
Like Rosario gives you a better chance to win right now. If your goal is to repeat, you should have kept him. Corbin Coe could end up being a better pitcher in the long run. That's entirely possible, but he's not at that level right now.
Yeah, and again, looking also at Jose Ramirez, I know Minerva is really counting on that being a big upgrade for him. And he did finish strong with Atlanta after the trade last year. But if you look at where his numbers were at before that trade, he was on a steady decline.
Playing in the AL Central, might I remind you.
Yeah, so again, I just don't know that you can count on that as a definite, stud guy in your lineup.
And I'll just say this, kind of going back to my point about not an entirely great supporting cast. You are 1 or 2 injuries away from ending up at the bottom of the division.
Yeah, absolutely.
If J-Ram, Barbosa, or Vaughn go down, like 2 out of those 3, your season's done. I'm just going to be honest. So.
Yeah. So then
number 2.
I got the Twins. I do have the Twins at number 2.
As do I. I'll just go ahead and say that's mine as well.
Yeah,
we can talk about it at the same time.
Yeah, I like I said in our off-season winners and losers podcast. I really like the Royce Lewis move for what it does in terms of replenishing the major league team. What GT did with that move was, it got him some younger guys and filled some holes for him. But they're guys that can step in right now and play and take advantage of. Again, I know a lot of people, the GMs in that division don't like to hear this. It is the weakest division in our league, and so making a move like that allows you to immediately become a whole lot more competitive in that division. To go along with some of the cornerstone pieces you kept, like LaRon Smith and Alex Kirilloff and Brewster Gratterall in the rotation. So I really like where Minnesota's headed.
Yeah, and I think that the talent around your superstars is a little bit better quality than Kansas City. You do have the stars in LeBron Smith and Alex Kirilloff, and you also have a stud in the rotation coming up in Kobe Halter, as well as Gratterall has always been performing well. But their role players around them, I think, are a step above Kansas City, which is why I have them a step above in the standings. And a lot of that has to do with the pieces they added from the Cardinals. With Evan White, you have Gold Glove caliber defensive first base. Tony Courtney, a great replacement for Royce Lewis. I mean, he's not up to the level of Royce Lewis, especially in terms of his hitting, but he's probably an upgrade defensively, honestly, at shortstop. And then you have another piece in rotation you can add with Mark Jones, and Tommy Fernandez is a solid outfielder. If not in your starting lineup, he's a definite fourth outfielder. So added a lot of great pieces there. I think the talent around the Stars is a better supporting cast than what the other teams below them in the division have.
Yeah, I would agree.
And to the surprise of no one, probably, the Detroit Tigers are division winners. And if you watched our last episode, which you probably should have watched it before you came to this episode, we highlighted Detroit as one of our winners of the offseason because they addressed one of their main need, and that was their starting pitching. And like I said this in the last episode, I think Detroit this year is better than Detroit last year when we were saying that Detroit was the best team in baseball at the beginning of the season. If it wasn't for that fall off, they would have competed for the World Series. And I think this year their team is scarier than it was last year, and that's a scary thought for the rest of the league. And honestly, I think I don't know if I can call this a bold prediction, but here's my prediction: is that the space between first and second place in terms of number of games, AL Central is going to be the largest. Detroit over Minnesota is going to be the largest number of games between a first and second place winner.
I think Detroit wins this division pretty handily. I mean, I could easily be wrong again. This year, like we were last year, but there's just so much talent there. They have such a depth now in starting pitching with, a mix of veteran and younger guys. That's a strength that they can potentially deal from to fill in, holes or account for injuries later on. They still have K-Bear Ruiz, one of the very best catchers in the league. You still have, young guys all over the place with Bobby Witt Jr. and Dexter Morgan and, Felix Matthews could really be in for a bounce back. I struggle to find a weakness with this team, to be quite honest.
Yep, absolutely. So there you have it, our AL Central with Detroit taking it, with Minnesota second, Kansas City third for both of us. We both thought we were going to drop a bomb there, but apparently not. Honestly, it took me a while to convince myself to put Minnesota above Kansas City. I almost still put Kansas City second. I think they finished very close to each other in terms of their record. But if Kansas City ends up with injuries, that's why they're going to fall, and that's why I ended up putting them third. And then we flipped our fourth and fifth place finishers with me having Chicago fourth and Cleveland fifth, and JR with the reverse with Cleveland fourth and Chicago fifth. All right. AL West. This is a fun one. But why don't we go ahead and get fifth place out of the way, because I think we both know what we're doing here.
Yeah, let's drop the A's in there.
Yeah, we're dropping the A's in at fifth. And do we really need to go in really big detail why? They're rebuilding. They had the worst record in the league last year, and there's no reason to think that they might be contending for that again.
Yeah, Danny's got a tough road ahead, with that crew.
He took over a really tough situation, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to him for being even willing to give it a go with the way the state the A's were in.
Yeah. Best of luck to him. I hope he doesn't finish last, but I think he's a couple years away from... Well, I wouldn't say he's a couple years away from moving up the division. He's definitely a few years away from competing. What we might see in the next year or two, him being able to move up the division standings, but it's going to be a while before we see Oakland in the playoffs again, to be honest.
Yeah.
All right, what's your number 4 team?
So number 4, I've got the Houston Astros.
All right.
You know, they've been one of these perennial, you know, kind of three teams battling it out here in the AL West. But you know, there really wasn't a whole lot that the Astros did here in the offseason to, you know, address some of the holes they had. They had some guys that, you know, have kind of been on the decline. You know, they made a couple moves, but you know, I just think they've really lost some steam and some firepower out of that squad. And some of the other teams, you know, particularly Seattle, have made some moves, and I just feel like that's going to drop them back a notch.
Well, it feels like we're on the same wavelength tonight because that's who I also had at number 4. But here's another bold statement. I think that the record that the Astros have is going to be around the record that the Twins and Royals have, who are finishing second and third in the AL Central. I just think that Houston still has a lot of talent on that roster, but the AL West is definitely the most competitive division, and probably I the two divisions that I think are the two best talent wise in baseball are the AL West and the NL Central. And the only reason the AL West isn't the best is because they have Oakland, to be honest. But with the other 4 teams in the division, Houston is still going to make a run to make the playoffs, but they have a tough road ahead with, like, as you mentioned, with all of the other teams in the division, with Seattle making the moves they did and Texas and LA being who they are and what they were last year. I just think that the moves that Seattle made are a bigger impact on the division than Houston not really making any moves. So,
Yeah, that's very fair.
all right. My third place team. I'm going to get roasted for this probably. And if you do the same thing I do, I swear you're reading my mind. But I'm putting LA at number 3. I have the Angels at number 3. I just think Seattle is going to have bounce back seasons from their offense because I think they underperformed to their abilities last year outside of Pedro Serrano. I think they underperformed, and I think the pieces that they've got in their rotation are panning out much better this year than they did last year. I think the Angels, they kind of stood pat. They didn't make moves to make any great changes, but they do have a lot of young guys that are potentially ready to come up and make an impact. Third place in this division is not anything to sneeze at, honestly. I just think that they fall a little bit short because they didn't really make any impact moves that will put them over the top.
All right, how about that? I was not
Yeah,
expecting.
2 years removed from winning a World Series and also being in the ALCS last year, and I have them finishing third in the division.
Yeah, you know,
Tom, don't kill me.
in full transparency, the top 3 in this division is really tough.
I mean,
to
top
call.
4 is honestly tough.
I see. I think Houston is definitely a step behind now after this offseason.
Okay, fair enough.
So at 3, I have maybe an even bigger surprise.
Don't tell me you put Texas there.
I have Texas at number.
Oh
3.
my gosh!
And,
What?
and again, you know, for me, it's more of a matter of what I think of what some other teams have done than what Texas. I mean, Texas has a really stacked roster. They definitely have a lot of talent there. I think the one thing that for me as I took a look at these predictions, I don't know that there is a superstar on Texas. You know, I think they're a very well balanced team. You know, I really thought Jose Merriman was going to be that superstar player, but he kind of had like an okay, good year last year, and I really thought after his rookie campaign, his second season, he may kind of really step up into star status.
Can I make a counter to that?
Yeah, of course.
I think Hans Kraus is superstar territory.
He could be. I mean, he's a really good pitcher. I don't know that I I don't know that I would look at him as a Cy Young contender. So I don't know that that makes him a superstar for me.
See, I would. I'm
But
putting Kraus on my list of contending for the Cy Young.
yeah,
That's just me. Anyway,
so yeah, so that's where it's at for me. And I think they have some unproven arms that they're gonna have to rely on a little bit. So I have them at 3. Although I will be rooting for Jordan Cage out there.
Absolutely.
So then from there at number 2, I have the LA Angels.
No way.
Yes. So
Oh no.
Oh yes.
Okay. All right.
Oh yes.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
So Angels, like you mentioned, I mean, they're definitely stood pat in a lot of ways, but I think there were reasons for that. Barry Allen is a guy that their top prospect, one of the top 5 prospects in eMLB. I don't know if he's going to start the season with the major league team, but he very well could. He's a guy that's going to be a real big jolt to that team. They still have some other young guys that are kind of pushing some of their veterans along. Tom still has a really good bullpen there, and I still think that team is going to be right there in the thick of it.
All right. Well, I actually have Seattle finishing second. I don't think the changes they made are enough to win the division, but they definitely jump into playoff contention. And they have, if they have the performance that we expected them to have last year, they have one of the best offenses in the league, and their pitching got majorly improved. And I think that's probably why you've got spoilers. You've got them winning the division because they're the only team left. So I do think Seattle takes the big step this year and gets into playoffs. I think they finish second in the division, right behind Texas, who I'm going to go ahead and put up at the top. And then you had Seattle winning that division. So for me, Texas, I just think that led by potential Cy Young candidate Hans Kraus, they have one of the best pitching rotations in baseball. They have definitely the fastest team in baseball, and you saw how well that worked for them last year. They didn't end up going far in the playoffs, but you were scared of them whenever you play them, because as soon as someone gets on first base, you could almost guarantee that they're going to end up on second one way or another. And that's just scary to think about, that you could get that kind of production out of almost everyone in your lineup are stealing bases. And I think that, coupled with they have a great pitching rotation, they have a great bullpen, fantastic bullpen even. I think they have the best bullpen in the AL. And with that, I just think that Texas is able to. They got a chip on their shoulder after losing the 1-game tiebreaker to win the division last year, and I think they take that as motivation going into this season, and they take over. And they also have a stud rookie that is going to probably be making their major league debut in catcher Lola Thurman. So that just adds another layer of this team is going to be really good.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. I mean, Texas does have a very good team. Again, would I be surprised if they won the division? No. I mean, Jamie just has a stacked roster there. I think Aiden mentioned it on the Here's Why You're Wrong, that it might be time for them. They may have a bad luck year coming with injuries, but I just love what Seattle did this offseason. Hats off to Hetz. Adding a guy like Rosario, I've said it before, I'm a huge Rosario fan, so maybe that's kind of coloring my prediction here a little bit, but that lineup just is a killer. With Eric Kelly and Pepe Clark and Pedro Serrano and Judge Dozer and JT Realmuto.
And they added Adalberto Mondesi with amazing speed.
Blazing speed, great defense at second base.
Yep.
And then, they have young, talented arms in that rotation with Cecil Cantrell and Ryan Shea and Andrew Manrique. At some point they're going to get Ricky Vaughn back, Justin Fuller. I just think, Seattle has been trying to break into that top level of the division last couple of years, hasn't quite been able to do it, and this is the year that Seattle is on top.
So you're calling for a breakout performance from the Mariners this year?
I am all in on the Mariners this year.
All right. Well, there you have it. This is our most controversial division. I have the Texas Rangers winning the division. You have the Mariners. I have the Mariners finishing second. You have the Rangers falling all the way to 3. Then you have the Angels at second. I have the Angels at third, and then we agree on 4 and 5 with Houston and Oakland. All right, so we know 3 of the playoff teams. We've got the division winners in Tampa, Detroit, and then you have Seattle. I have Texas. Who is your, just do one, who is the top wild card team? Who gets the home field advantage in the wild card playoff?
For me, that's the Angels. I still think they're too good to miss out on the playoffs entirely, even though I have the Mariners winning that division.
And I'm going to pick from the AL West as well. I'm going to have the Mariners as my home team for the AL wild card. So, I guess I'll go first here. My wild card matchup in Seattle, they're going to face off with their AL West rival, Seattle Mariners and the Los Angeles Angels. I think the AL West ends up with 3 teams in the playoffs. I think that division is so good. And yes, you could make the argument that they're going to beat up on each other and artificially bring their records down as a result. My counter argument is I think those teams are going to beat up on everyone else and lower their records. That's my argument.
Yeah, it's tough. This was the hardest part for me. Out of all these predictions, determining who my second wild card was the toughest decision I had to make.
Yeah, for me it was between the Angels and the Orioles, and I just think the Angels just barely eke it out.
Yeah, my head tells me to pick the Rangers because of that team that Jamie has and all the talent there. The Orioles are just so close there again with Ethan Knight, and I just hate it for Brendan that Jim Reed suffered that injury because he was set up to really have really a second chance at a World Series this year. I think if he was healthy, but I am going with the Minnesota Twins in the second wild card spot.
Bold prediction.
Last season, in cage around the cage, I picked Kansas City to be one of the wild card teams when nobody was after them. This year, that team is the Twins. I love what GT has done.
No, go ahead and finish. I just have a comment.
I love what GT has done with that Royce Lewis trade, adding to his big league roster. I love some of the young arms that he's got coming up to join with Gratterall and Emerson Hancock. I am going Twins, baby.
So does that mean that the Twins will win the division because that's what KC did last year when you predicted them as a wild card team?
Maybe.
That was my comment.
Mark, make sure you go at least 400 the second half of the season.
Oh. Ouch.
Sorry.
You know he's coming. You saw the moves he made this offseason. He's looking to rectify that. Oh my goodness. All right, so I say we both had some bold predictions. My bold prediction is that I have 3 teams out of the AL West, and yours is that Minnesota climbs all the way into the playoffs after finishing 4th in the AL Central?
Yeah, I think they were 4th, yeah.
And wasn't it you that earlier said the AL Central is the weakest division in the league? And you have 2 teams coming out of that division?
Mm-hmm, I do.
I think seems to be contradicting yourself, my friend.
I think Minnesota gets enough wins off the lower tier of that division, and from some of the other bottom feeders in the other 2, and that bad luck for Texas just stings them out of the playoffs.
Now, here's the interesting thing about both of our lists. We both have one glaring team that's out, and that is our defending AL champion, Baltimore Orioles. Now, I almost put them in over LA, but I think LA's talent at this point is better, especially when you consider Orioles not having Jim Reed this year. So I have them as they're the first team out for me, but it's interesting that we both say that Baltimore's not making it back in the playoffs. And I hate saying that because Brendan has been defending my Cardinals for a long time. And I didn't really defend his team at all. Sorry, Brendan.
And for me, like from my standpoint, it comes from, I really believe heavily in superstar talent. I think that's a big reason why Washington was able to win the World Series last year when we all said their bullpen's trash, their starting rotation is kind of but they had star players. They had a lot of star players that really stepped up. And Baltimore is heading into this year without two of its big superstars that it had last year.
So you don't think Ethan Knight, Nick Spence, and Buster Bluth are enough star power?
I don't think so.
Wow.
No.
All right. That's bold because those are some pretty stud. I would love to have any of those three on my team, honestly. But alas, they are not. All right. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to do something crazy here. I'm going to do some live editing here. I'm going to reset this, and I'm going to use this as our kind of like our makeshift playoff bracket.
Okay.
Oh, it reset it to what the tier maker. It was ranking the logos of the MLB. All right, so at the top we'll go AL champs. Then we'll go ALCS. Then we'll go ALDS. And then we'll go wild card, as in like where they're gonna end. So I need to delete that row. I'm going to exit out of this. Sorry, you guys are seeing live editing as I just had this idea to do this.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. So on my side, my wild card game is, where are they? The Mariners and the Angels. And then and then your wild card was Minnesota and
Angels.
So we both have the Angels in there. So Angels are home for you. So I'm putting them first.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we got to determine who is the number one seed, because that'll determine who they face in the ALDS. Who is your number one seed?
So my number one seed is the Rays. I think the Rays end up with the best record.
Rays, and I'm going with Detroit for my number one seed. All right, and so who gets the home field advantage for the 2-3 matchup between Detroit and Seattle for you?
I think Detroit. I have Detroit with the number 2 record.
So Detroit and then Seattle. And then I've got the Rays coming in at number 2 and Texas at number 3 for me. All right. So here we go. Here are our playoff matchup. I'm going to keep moving them up as they win, and we'll see who reaches the top. I think this is a pretty interesting. Instead of making an actual bracket, we got a tier list bracket kind of thing.
I dig it.
All right. I'll go first. My wild card winner is going to be LA. I think the magic of Seattle ends in the wild card game. I will move the Angels on to play Detroit in the ALDS.
Yeah, by a similar token, I've got the Angels beating Minnesota. I think, the Twins magic runs out there as well. So Tom has somebody like Shohei Ohtani or even Hazel Lacy that can start that one game and be pretty tough to beat.
Yep, absolutely. All right, pick one of your ALDS matchups and predict it.
So Rays and Angels, I think that'll be a fun series if we get to see that. But I'm going with the Rays, taking a step forward there, and their talented crew.
All right. I'll go with the other matchup that has the Rays because I have the Rays beating Texas. Again, going to be a great series. All of these are going to be great matchups, honestly, because these are all some great teams. But I do think the Rays are going to be a better team this year than they were last year. And I just think Texas, with how I think age plays a factor in this one, because I mentioned how young Texas is and how long they're going to be good for. But I think that plays a factor here in that they're still trying to figure out how to win a playoff series. But they make it farther than they did last year. Last year, they lost in the wildcard game. This year, they make it to a division series because they win the division for me. But I don't have them getting past the Rays. I think it'll take 5 games. I think it'll be a great series. But I think the Rays beat it out there. ALDS, Detroit, and LA. Oh, my goodness. That is a difficult one. I think Detroit made the moves necessary to get to the ALCS. So I'm moving on Detroit.
Can't blame you there.
I'm going to say both ALDS series go 5 from the AL. I think that it's that competitive in the AL at the top.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all to see all of those go 5 for sure. For my matchup with the Tigers and the Mariners, I say the Seattle run keeps going and they move to the ALCS.
The Cinderella story continues. They're still dancing, ladies and gentlemen. I
Yeah.
can't do a Vic Vitale impression, so I'm not going to try.
They're moving on, baby. They're heading to the ALCS.
There we go. Oh, that's funny. That was actually really good. I wasn't going to try because it would have sounded a lot worse than that.
The Pedro Serrano, he's a PTP. You throw Alejandro Rosario in there, he's got all the tools.
Oh, that was awesome. Oh man, I gotta compose myself now. I'm in the presence of greatness right now. All right, so we both have the Rays in the ALCS, but I have them matching up with Detroit. You have them matching up with Seattle. What happens? You're first.
This is a tough one for me. I got to go with the Rays though. Postseason, again, I think a big reason why Brendan made it where he did last year was having those two big stud pitchers at the head of his team in the playoffs. And, with the Rays, he's got Ben Spears, he's got Jim Giesler. I think by the time the postseason rolls around, Doc Luger is a real stud. Efren Contreras, there's a ton of starting pitching talent there to go along with all this hitting talent. I think this is the year Charles gets back to the World Series.
All right. I don't know who to pick. this game, this is how much I can't decide. I said the ALDS we're all going to go 5. We're both going to go 5 games. I think the ALCS is going to go 7 games. We're going to get the max number of games from the American League side. As crazy as that sounds, I think Detroit has something to prove, and I think they end up as the AL champs. I think that disappointment last year is motivation. And they're not going to let it happen again, and it's going to carry them all the way to the World Series.
It has definitely fueled Mark, and he has done everything possible to make sure it doesn't happen again and make sure they take a step forward.
But I don't think he overcorrected. I don't think it caused him to make hasty decisions.
Because he didn't upset the core of his team. I think that's the key. He still recognized what the core of his team was and did not mess with what got him to that point.
And I do think his team will be better able to maintain performance because if they have a 12-game lead at September, they don't blow it this time. That's just not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
All right, so there you have it. I have Detroit as the AL champs taking out the Rays, and JR has the Rays as the AL champs taking out the Cinderella story Seattle.
We're going crazy down here in Tampa, baby. I'm going crazy. I'm going there to the Tropicana field. I can't wait to get there with all my friends.
I bet Aiden will be happy about that, being a real Rays fan. All right. Well, there you have it. And now we're going to move on. We're gonna touch on these real quick. We're not going to spend too much time, but we do want to give our predictions for the AL MVP, Cy Young, and Rookie of the Year. And you want to start with Rookie of the Year and work our way to MVP?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, you go first. Rookie of the Year.
All right, Rookie of the Year, this one's always a tough one to do at this time of year when you got a lot of talented guys who you're not sure if they're necessarily going to break camp with the Major League club or if maybe they're going to spend another, year in the minors or half year in the minors. So, part of me really wanted to pick Barry Allen because I really think that, he's on the cusp of making a real big splash there with the Angels. But I'm going to go with Kobe Halter, pitcher for the Twins. And I think this is going to tie into, why I picked the Twins to get into the playoffs. He's going to be able to step in, I think, as a fourth starter for them. And he's been a solid prospect for them throughout his career there. And I think he's going to be able to step in there, really perform well in that rotation.
Yeah, I was about to say, it goes along with your narrative of Minnesota surprising people and making it to the playoffs. And if they were to do so, Colby's going to have to be the Rookie of the Year, you would think.
Yeah.
All right. So my Rookie of the Year, I don't even care if he doesn't start the year with the team. I'm going with Ed Brown. I'm going with the number 3 overall pick last year that surprised everybody with going to the Chicago White Sox instead of the Chicago Cubs. I think Ed Brown is going to come out into the league by storm, whether it is now or whether it is a month or so into the season. I think he's ready. I think he is going to make a difference on that Chicago team. I know I do have Chicago ending up fourth in the division, but it's not going to be because of Ed Brown. I think he's going to have that kind of offensive season that we saw from Kent Herbeck last year. I think he's going to replicate the Herbeck performance from the Cubs last year, and the Rookie of the Year third baseman is going to stay in Chicago. It's just going to be on the AL side this time.
All right, good pick. I think, yeah, if he comes up and gets enough time to play, I think he's going to make an impact.
All right, I mentioned him earlier. I said he's going to be a key to the Texas Rangers' run to the division, and I think Hans Kraus is going to be your Cy Young winner. I almost went with the easy pick in Ethan Knight, but I just think that Hans Kraus is going to have more of an impact in carrying his team to the playoffs than Ethan Knight is, and I just think he's been a consistent performer the past couple seasons, but I think this season is the season to break out into a dominant performance. So that is my pick for the Cy Young.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. You know, he's definitely been a great performer for them. I'm going, with Tampa Bay with Ben Spears. He finished third in the Cy Young Award voting last year behind Ethan Knight and Jim Reed. He was second in WAR among pitchers last season, and he's somebody that when he first signed with Tampa, kind of that talented guy, kind of out of nowhere and got a big contract. A lot of people I think were looking for him to fail, and he struggled just a little bit, right out of the gate. But he has turned into a dominant left-handed pitcher. Had 224 strikeouts last year in 200 innings. So I think he's going to be a big reason why Tampa Bay, is back on top of that division this year.
All right, who is your MVP?
MVP again. I'm on the all aboard the Seattle train this year, and that means Pedro Serrano is going to be the MVP, the big-time slugger from the Pacific Northwest. He's put up just incredible numbers, his first couple seasons in the league, and I think this year, with some of the other additions they've made there, him taking a few more steps forward in his development as a player. He led the American League in home runs last year with 43. I think you could see even more than that this year. He hit 54 the year before. So I think we're going to see Pedro Serrano be back in business as the MVP of the American League.
All right. And I actually made a last-second change to mine. All right, I'm going to give an honorable mention because I think this player is fantastic. But I think an MVP talent is one that helps lead a team to the playoffs because of their performance. And while I think Danny Diaz is going to put up MVP-type numbers, I think Boston not going to be able to make the playoffs is going to be a detriment to his MVP performance. And I think it's going to instead go to an AL East rival in Wander Franco. I think that that talent in third base in the AL East is stacked with Franco, Diaz, Buster Bluth. It's just fantastic for those three players. But I think Wander Franco is leading his team to an AL East title and an ALCS appearance based on my predictions. He's just an all-around stud talent, can do pretty much everything you can ask him to do. And I think he's going to break out and become the MVP of the AL this year. He was close last year, I believe. Was he second or third behind Verdugo?
He actually didn't rank that highly last year in the award voting. Okay, he wasn't in the top 10.
Well, there goes to show they didn't do that much research.
I completely agree, though. I think he's headed for a monster year, and if he doesn't win, I don't think he finishes anywhere outside of, say, the top 3 or 4 guys. I think he's headed for a big time bounce back season.
All right. Well, there you have it. We have our American League predictions. Congratulations, you guys are good. Oh, wait, we had different predictions, so they can't all come true. We started out pretty close. But, so, yeah, I had Detroit making the World Series. You have the Rays making the World Series. And tune in to our next episode to see where we go with the National League. And on that episode, we will predict our World Series matchups with Detroit and Tampa Bay taking on whoever we predict from the NL side. And I'm looking forward to the season. AL is going to be very, very competitive. I believe that it's like our predictions, like even teams that don't make the playoffs could easily find themselves being the AL champs. Like, for example, I could see Baltimore still making a run at the World Series again because they still have a lot of good talent there. Boston could make it back into the playoffs again. Like you said, Minnesota could surprise some teams, make it to the playoffs. I think it's going to be a very fun year in the AL. So I'll be looking forward to see how it all shakes out in the end. Well, let us know what you all think we got right, what we got wrong, what you think of our predictions, because I know a lot of you are going to yell at me. Tom's probably going to yell at me. Minerva's probably going to yell at both of us. But with that said, thank you so much for tuning in to our AL predictions. Any last words before we sign off for this episode, JR?
No, I can't really add anything to what you said. I think we're all just anxious to get the season here and see if any of our squirrels find anything, any nuts out there.
Can I, as a Cardinals fan, can I just bring up the rally squirrel now? Can I?
I think that's fair.
If you don't know what the rally squirrel is, you need to look it up. It was a part of one of our World Series runs in real life. It was a lot of fun. It was because at that time we were going for our 11th World Series championship, so they started making T-shirts that had like a World Series ring on all 5 fingers, and it was like we need an 11th one for the squirrel's tail. So it was a lot of fun. But anyway, thank you so much again for tuning in tonight. Make sure to tune in to any part of the Dana-Farber Institute Streamathon that Commish is putting on that you can. There are going to be streams running from Thursday through Sunday all across Twitch. With a lot of different content from OOTP to Mario Kart to even cooking streams are going to be happening, as well as our podcast stream is going to be happening as well. So please tune in, help support, help spread the word, try to bring as many people into this as possible so that we can raise as much money as possible. And until the next episode where we will be talking about our NL season predictions, we will see you next time.